Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janna Vallabha Giridhari. Jaya Gopi Janna Vallabha Giridhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So we're reading the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 25, text 19. Oh, so this is a new microphone?
Yeah.
What is it? USB.
Kind of have to hold it. The on button you have to hold for a few seconds.
Why hold it?
Yeah.
It looks like you got one on the right, one on the left. You got a USB port. Yujamanya Bhakya Bhagavati Akila Atmani Sadrisha Asti Shiva Antaha Yoginam Brahmasiddhaye Nayujmanaya Bhaktya Bhagavati Akilatmani Sadrishosti Shiva Panta Yoginam Brahmasiddhaye Nayujmanaya Bhaktya Bhagavati Akilatmani Sadrishosti Shiva Panta Yoginam Brahmasiddhaye Nayujmanaya Bhaktya Bhagavati Akilatmani Sadrishosti Shiva Panta Yoginam Brahmasiddhaye Nayujmanaya Bhaktya
Bhagavad Yakilatmani Sadrishosti Shiva Panta Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
Yujamanaya Bhaktya
Yujamanaya Bhaktya
Bhagavad Yakilatmani
Bhagavad Yakilatmani
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
Nayujamanaya Bhaktya
Yujamanaya Bhaktya
Bhagavad Yakilatmani
Bhagavad Yakilatmani
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
Yakilatmani
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
Yujamanaya Bhaktya
Nayujamanaya Bhaktya Bhagavati Yakilatmani
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
Nayujamanaya Bhaktya
Nayujamanaya Bhaktya
Bhagavad Yakilatmani
Bhagavati Yakilatmani
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
नायुज्यमाना भक्त्या
Nayujamanaya Bhaktya
भगवती खिलात्मने
Bhagavati Yakilatmani
सत्रशोस्ति शिवा फन्ता
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
योगिनां ब्रह्मसिद्धये
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
Online, please chant. Yujamanaya Bhaktya
भगवत्याखिलात्मनि
Bhagavad Yakilatmani
सदृशोऽस्ति शिवः पन्था
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
योगिनां ब्रह्मसिद्धये
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
भगवनया भक्त्या
Yujamanaya Bhaktya
भगवत्याखिलात्मनि
Bhagavad Yakilatmani
सदृशोऽस्ति शिवः पन्था
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
योगिनां ब्रह्मसिद्धये
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
Nayujamanaya Bhaktya
Yujamanaya Bhaktya
Bhagavad Yakilatmani
Bhagavad Yakilatmani
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
Sadrishosti Shiva Panta
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye
Yoginam Brahma Siddhaye. That's everyone.
That's everyone? Okay, great. Watch out for everybody with sinners.
Na
Yujamana being performed. Bhaktya, devotional service. Bhagavati, towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Akila Atmani, the Super Soul. Sadrisha, like. Asti, there is. Shiva, auspicious. Panta, path. Yoginam, of the yogis. Brahma Siddhaye, For perfection in self-realization. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Perfection in self-realization cannot be attained by any kind of yogi unless he engages in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for that is the only auspicious path. That knowledge and renunciation are never perfect unless joined by devotional service is explicitly explained here. Na yujamanaya means without being dovetailed. When there is devotional service, then the question is where to offer that service. Devotional service is to be offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the supersoul of everything, for that is the only reliable path of self-realization, or Brahman realization. The word Brahma Siddhyaye means to understand oneself to be different from matter, to understand oneself to be Brahman. The Vedic words are Aham Brahmasmi. Brahma Siddhi means that one should know that he is not matter. He is pure soul. There are different kinds of yogis, but every yogi is supposed to engage in self-realization or Brahman realization. It is clearly stated here that unless one is fully engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot have easy approach to the path of Brahma Siddhi. In the beginning of the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that when one engages himself in the devotional service of Vasudeva, spiritual knowledge and renunciation of the material world automatically become manifest. Thus, a devotee does not have to try separately for renunciation or knowledge. Devotional service itself is so powerful that by one's service attitude, everything is revealed. It is stated here, Shiva Panta. This is the only auspicious path for self-realization. The path of devotional service is the most confidential means for attaining Brahman realization. That perfection in Brahman realization is attained through the auspicious path of devotional service indicates that the so-called Brahman realization, or realization of the Brahmajyoti effulgence, is not Brahma Siddhi. Beyond that Brahma Jyoti, there is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Upanishads, a devotee prays to the Lord to kindly put aside the effulgence, Brahma Jyoti, so that the devotee may see within the Brahma Jyoti the actual eternal form of the Lord. Unless one attains realization of the transcendental form of the Lord, there is no question of bhakti. Bhakti necessitates the existence of the recipient of devotional service, and the devotee who renders devotional service, Brahma Siddhi, through devotional service, is realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The understanding of the effulgent rays of the body of the Supreme Godhead is not the perfect stage of Brahma Siddhi, or Brahman realization, nor is the realization of the Paramatma feature of the Supreme Person perfect. For Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is Akhilatma. He is the Supersoul. One who realizes the Supreme Personality realizes the other features, namely the Paramatma feature and the Brahman feature, and that totalization is Brahma Siddhi. Okay, great. So we've been talking a lot about Bhagavan, the possessor of all the opulences, and he's the basis of Brahman, and he's the super soul, right? So this statement is actually realized by us, right? You have practical knowledge of that, right? By devotional service, engaging in Krishna and knowledge about Krishna, right? Krishna is the basis of Brahman, and Paramatma is in each and every atom, right? So we understand that clearly, right? But when I was engaged in, well, so-called yoga and meditation, meditation, it was, and meditating on the impersonal Brahman didn't really have much instruction. I had a couple of books that I had read so far. And I received the Bhagavad Gita from my friend. So I was still reading. Well, I read the introduction. I was still reading the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita when I came to the temple. So I came to the temple to Sunday feast and stayed and joined. They said basically you really got to read the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita about the eternality of the soul. But yeah, I didn't really have any real information or knowledge, or I was just gaining information about Krishna, right? I had heard something about four-armed Vishnu. I saw the pictures, didn't really know what they were. You kind of just assume that what Krishna says in Bhagavad, you kind of assume it this way. Mamudha, let's see, they're Naradam, fullest and lowest of mankind. Hita Jnana, their knowledge is stolen by illusion, right? They assume that somehow or other, before Krishna accepted this form of personality, he was impersonal. And in the ultimate sense, he will return to impersonal Brahman, right? So like they're considering Krishna to be like an ordinary person. He's some sort of yogi. He realized Brahman. So because he realized Brahman, what Prabhupada said is that the yogis, they mistakenly think themselves to be Narayan. So they address themselves as Narayan, because they believe themselves, if they have some Brahman realization, that now they're Narayan. And in the ultimate sense, Narayan is impersonal Brahman. So, the verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Brahmeti, Paramanti, Bhagavan iti Shabdate. It's that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is realized in three phases of understanding by the specific, let's see, what is it, by the practitioner or the specific student as impersonal Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan, right? So there was a book that I had. It was some writings from Srila Prabhupada's articles that he was contributing to what was the magazine and the newspaper in the Gaudiya Math? The Harmonist? Yeah, was it the Harmonist, the Patrika? So anyways, one of Prabhupada's disciples, one of the devotees, had come across these articles and put them all together in a book and called it Renunciation. See, Yukta and Vairagya, knowledge through renunciation. Oh, renunciation through wisdom. Yeah, the green book, right? Through wisdom, yeah. So it's knowledge, jnana, vairagya, right? Detachment. So one automatically gets vairagya, it automatically gets detachment. So you kind of like notice, like the first day when we come to the temple, basically what Maharaj told me, he said, well, everything that you have, you really don't need it. Well, you don't need it here, but everything that you need, you don't need it anyways, And so, so you get your orange dhoti, your orange kirta, your talon kropas and your beads, some silak, and that's all you need. A Bhagavad Gita, right? So, we got a book bag. It had all the books that we needed to study: Nectar of Instruction, Ishopanishad, Nectar of Devotion, and Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna book. So basically, Prabhupada's talking about this verse in Sri Ishopanishad, that please remove that dazzling effulgence so that I may see your smiling face. Please remember all my penances, austerities, and sacrifices. Please, he's asking, the devotee's asking the Lord to please allow him to come into his association, or come into his well, I guess that's what he's asking. Asking me to come into his, yeah. Please remember all my, all of that I've done. Yeah, you know that verse, right? Yeah, we chanted and memorized all the verses at Ishopanishad and in Nectar of Instruction. And so we're finally getting into the teachings of Lord Kapiladev. Now, Gaura Chandra was giving this class in San Jose, listened to her a couple of times. What he had mentioned was he outlined the process of yoga that Kapiladev is explaining. So Kapiladev here is explaining, just like in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, the eternality of the soul, right? And the path of realization and devotional service. Then comes the yamas and the niyamas, right? The do's and the don'ts, the rules and regulations, an analytical study of material nature, how actually everything is Krishna's energy. Krishna separated material energies. That was one thing Vikas Swami was talking about today. He was talking about how, a lot of the devotees would ask Srila Prabhupada, how we perceive things or how he sees things. So they were asking, how do you see a tree? And he says, well, I see the tree as Krishna's energy, right? There's a spiritual soul. It's Krishna's energy. Prabhupada was talking about that in the verse. Says, don't just say a tree, see Krishna's energy. So there's earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. There's a spiritual soul in there. The soul is there due to the karma of the living entity. So that's what they were talking about. Is that Prabhupada was saying that the result of the karma which the living entity is bound by is this material body. And this material body is, again, accepting material bodies in the material world. So that's what they were talking about suffering, accepting material bodies. So the living entity is not subject to suffering or not subject to accepting material bodies, right? But the living entity is forced by nature to accept material bodies and to accept the sufferings. So Sanatana Goswami was asking Lord Chaitanya about this. Then if the spiritual soul is not subject to the suffering but is forced to accept the suffering, then can you explain this? So Prabhupada, he said, he quoted two verses, Nicho, Nichananam. You're saying the supreme eternal, the Nicho is Krishna, and all the living entities as plural, Nichanam. And then he says, Na hanyate hanyamani sarye. So for the soul, there's neither birth nor death, nor having once been as he ever ceased to be. Is unborn, eternal, ever existing, undying, and primeval. He's not slain when the body is slain. Right. So basically, it all boils down to, our good friend, Ahankara, right? It's seamless, right? It's we don't really identify it, right? In fact, that's what it is. It's identification, but false identification or real identification. Real identification is Nitya Hoy Shrup, Nitya Hoy. Shrup. Krishnara Nityadas. Somehow or other that eluded me. Nityara Krishnadas. So that we are, our form, our Sarup, is devotional service or devotional servant to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's the actual natural position. Somebody doesn't want to be a servant. That's why we're here in the material world. Everybody thinks that they're the ones that should be served, or everyone's thinking they're the center of all their activities, like that. But, self-centered, but that's not the actual point. It's the Krishna-centered, right? So if everybody's all centered around Krishna-centered, so that's the whole idea about the ashram and the deity worship in the temple, is that the deity is the proprietor. That's Agora Nitai. And all of our activities are all centered about our, pleasing Gora Nitai. We have many different things that we do, bringing people into association, right? So that's what Prabhupada wanted, attractive centers and attractive deities and altars to attract persons to Krishna consciousness. Basically, don't really have any idea or any clue, or it's just some other thing again, right? And the mind is accepting and rejecting, and according to the association of the intelligence, the mind is again accepting the exact same thing it formerly rejected, just under another set of circumstances. So that was what they're talking about, what the mind is in association with the false ego and the intelligence. The mind itself may appear to be a ravenous, rapturous God in itself, right? And you have your experiences or subtle sense objects. The mind is they're saying the basic function of the mind is acceptance and rejection. And at the same time, there's the subtle sense objects perceived within the mind, and the actual central objects with their gross objects is also experienced within the mind. And so these things are explained in Bhagavad Gita. There's a verse there, the yogi who restrains the senses and organs of action, but within who dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. Then Prabhupada talks about such a show bottle spiritualist. You know what a show bottle is? You ever seen those? The colored water? They put them in the window at the drugstore. Jai Gora Nitai Ki Jai. Have those big giant square tops on them. Those big square tall bottles with colored water in them. Yeah. So because Swami was talking about this, he was talking about like the different yogis. They said no matter how high and high and high these yogis seem to be becoming, they go up and up and up. Some of these yogis, there was a experience at the Kumbh Mela where someone's father told their son that his father and his great-grandfather met this man before, that this yogi is actually 700 years old and actually appears like a youth, right? He said what they do, they take their hair, that's the reason why they twirl their hair on the top of the head, right? Because the hair becomes very, very long. The hair grows down to your knees and down to your feet if you've grown your hair for over 300 years. So he was talking about the different yogis in comparison, that their hair is longer because they're older. They're hundreds of years older than the other ones, right? So he said, this won't actually do you any good for going back home, back to Godhead. The whole purpose is actually missed. But they can go to higher planetary, such like Mahaloka or Brahmaloka, but see, they're still within the jurisdiction of the material world, and they missed the whole point. Then they were talking about how Srila Prabhupada, he very easily explained a very, very difficult subject matter to try to understand from the Vedas, and that's that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Krishna, and one should render devotional service to Krishna, and giving the explanations in Prabhupada's commentary, purports, and translations according to the previous acharyas, supporting this specific point of that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was also expressing, that devotional service to the Supreme Person of Godhead is actually the highest goal that one can perform or one can achieve to continue to perform, to be eligible to go back home, back to Godhead, and is actually the only method, the only means. Otherwise, one will just simply still remain in the material world, and from one degree to another, still hovering on the mental platform of the mental speculation. Does that make sense? Yeah. So he also cited another example. He was saying, like the Bhagavad Gita classes in 1966 in New York that Prabhupada recorded. He said everything is there. Everything's all included. It becomes self-realized. Prabhupada had mentioned like the internalizated soul and devotional service and karma yoga. And that was another thing that he had mentioned, that Ramananda Roy, he was inquired by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what is the goal of life? And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had dismissed jnana, karma, and yoga, and vanashram, right? But what they were expressing was specifically devotional service. So he taught a Mataji, Jamuna Devi, deity worship, right? How to do the deity worship. And then when Srila Prabhupada was departing, when he was leaving, going to the next traveling, he told her, he said, no, I've taught you everything. All you have to do is, do everything that I taught you, the deity worship, and study my books. Everything that I've given you now is sufficient to be able to go back home, back to Godhead. So now we have so many books. Prabhupada wanted to give us the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, We have the teachings of Lord Kapila, which are some classes that Prabhupada had delivered on these verses. And so that was another thing that Gaura Chandra had also mentioned too. Not only did he outline the process that Lord Kapila Dev is explaining, but they also explained that this is the second largest section in Srimad Bhagavatam. The first largest section of Srimad Bhagavatam is the Uddhava Bhagavad Gita. And the second largest subject matter in Srimad Bhagavatam is this subject matter here revolving around Lord Kapila Dev and Kardama Muni and Devahuti and Lord Kapila Dev's instructions on Sankhya Yoga and devotional service. Let's see. So maybe I could jog my memory if there was anything else I wanted to try to mention, think of. Any questions or comments or anything? You have a question?
Is there any difference between Bhakti Yoga and the process described by Kapila in this section?
The process described by who?
Kapila Dev.
Kapila Dev. Are you saying any difference of devotional service or bhakti than what Lord Kapila Dev is explaining?
Yeah.
That's your question? Well, the whole idea is to establish devotional service of bhakti yoga. That's why Lord Kapila Dev is explaining all the other peripherals, like that. But the actual principle of the process is devotional service of bhakti yoga. That's what Lord Kapila Dev is describing and explaining. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, I wonder if Maharaj would like to comment, because you mentioned there's yama, niyama, there's different specific processes mentioned, which we are not given by the Gaudiya acharyas.
Yeah, we're doing the yamas and the niyamas. They're the do's and don'ts. Basically, it comes down to, but that would be nice to hear Maharaj, what Maharaj could say about that. But like the rules, no illicit sex, no meat eating, no intoxication, and no gambling. So these all correspond to ahimsa, nonviolence, truthfulness, cleanliness, austerity. It's basically the principles that go along with the 4 rules and regulations. Are ahimsa, nonviolence, is non-killing, which is no meat eating. And cleanliness, no illicit sex is cleanliness. No gambling, this is truthfulness, right? And no intoxication, this is austerity, right? And so just like what Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, these are the qualities of the Brahminical qualities, or the qualities to develop sattva guna, right? So these are what Kapila Dev is also explaining exactly this, the do's and don'ts of the yamas and niyamas. So the positive side and the negative side. Prabhupada was saying, he said, we don't say no eating, but we say no meat eating. And he says, that you see in our Krishna Prasad, we have so many nice vegetables and grains and milk products. We can take the fat from the animal in the form of the milk products, and transform that into so many nice things, curd and yogurt, and cheese. But does that make sense? Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, because everything's included, but yeah, we're also doing...
it's called Sankhya Yoga, so there's a connotation that it has to do with categorically analyzing the elements of creation.
Right, yeah, it includes that, Sankhya Yoga, yeah, the analytical study of the material nature. Krishna explains that also in Bhagavad Gita. In fact, those are the verses I've been listening to. I have 8 of them. There's verses on the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that Prabhupada gave in Vrindavan. Api, Bhumi, Api, Vayo. Let's see. So it's the earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. Altogether, these comprise my separated material energies. And Krishna explains how, as Paramatma, he's within the atom and within the soul of each and every living entity. Lord Kapila Dev, he analyzes the material world in 24 elements. It also includes the separated material energies, and what Krishna also explains, how there's Oh yeah, because that was another thing. Ahankara Vibhu Atma, right? The bewildered spiritual soul, under the influence of the three most material nature, thinks himself to be the doer of activities, which is actually in actuality carried about by nature. You know, and so what is it? Brahma Bhuta Prasadatma Nakanchati Nasanchati, right? Brahma Bhuta Prasadatma. But yeah, what's the translation for that verse? When comes the Brahma Bhuta stage, the Brahma Bhuta. Yeah, so Lord Kapila is also explaining how there's the 5 working senses, the 5 knowledge acquiring senses, the mind, intelligence, false ego, right? As well as the 8 separated material energies, the karma of the living entity, the time factor, and the 3 modes of material nature, and the living entity and the super soul. So there's an atheistic Kapila. He didn't include the nature of the soul and the super soul. He's the modern metaphysics, modern yoga society. It doesn't include super soul, or Krishna or Vishnu. But this I'll describe to understand the process of devotional service, that we're eternal spiritual souls. We're not in the material body, and that we're not meant for engaging in sense gratification in the material world and revolving through the acceptance of the material bodies by force against our will, even though it's not our nature. Even though we're not subjected to material bodies and suffering, we're forced to accept it, right? In the material body by illusion, under the influence of ahankara, false ego, forgetfulness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with a desire to enjoy being bound up by a karma and desire. Right. So does that make sense? All right, George.
So recently, I was part of a small exchange that really struck me, and one devotee was describing some of the non-devotional preoccupations of the conditioned souls, and then there was an input that, see, that's why, the way I understood it was that understanding that the living entities are suffering makes one a potent preacher. So in this context of this verse, Kapila is saying if they don't have bhakti, right, or if they don't perform devotional service, then what was it again? The essence of this verse?
Yeah, perfection and self-realization cannot be attained by any kind of yogi. So they don't get perfection and self-realization.
Right. So could you describe how some of these topics about like how this connects, how can this fuel our preaching?
Oh yeah. Well, when I was on Sankirtan, where we get really fired up, we had these big giant marathons, and all our Sankirtan generals, they got us all fired up, and then they gave us a lot of like dates and honey and what is it? Cream cheese and Mahaprasad and the Mongol sweets. Oh yeah, come up and get a Tulsi leaf, for big book distributors. So these were your rewards. That'd be kind of nice to get a sweet ball or a Tulsi leaf, right? It's not so much the recognition. That's what all the big book distributors used to say. But we get pretty fired up. You get the sweet ball, you get a Tulsi leaf, and you feel pretty good and pretty satisfied, because you're out there, and you're really scraping it and you're really praying. But yeah, they're saying that, these living entities, they're going to hell, but if they just see or read one word or just touch this book, they can be saved. This is the beginning. Knowledge. Right, when we're out on Sankirtan, we give them, a candy or give them a. That's what we used to have. That was like the breaker. We had a candy, and during Christmas time, we had candy canes. That was like the breaker. We handed it to them, right? And a lot of times they shook their head and they looked at it. They didn't even know what was happening. They're just, we're kind of like blasting them out of the modes or out off of the mental platform somewhere, We kind of like hit the bucket, pitch in. Everybody's giving a donation. We show them the picture, food distribution, book distribution, education and school systems like that. They go, oh, okay, great for the kids. We're giving the book, right? They go, oh, what's this all about? So we if we had a time to explain it to them, they're saying, give them the book, let the book give them the preaching. But these people, they're engaging in sinful activities. We're stopping them dead center on their, on their sense gratification, sinful activity spree, just whatever they're doing, and kind of snapping them out of it, giving them a book, let them take it home, let them read it. They have it in their home, or invite them to come to the temple for the Sunday feast, to associate with us, it's kind of a big eye opener. It's like, well, did you know that everything that you've ever done is actually really sinful, and you actually really never knew it? Your educational systems, your religious systems, your society, friendship, and love systems, it's all erroneous and all wrong, all on the wrong basis. They're really sentimental about it too. They really want to share their meat eating with you and their intoxication with you. And they're like really disappointed if you don't go along with it, But, we're like really disappointed if you, don't chant Hare Krishna or come to the temple, go read the book, kind of stop this nonsense, It's like, so that's what Prakash Swami was saying. They were saying that Prabhupada, he was saying that if you chant Hare Krishna and be happy. And so Prabhupada, he demonstrated this. He went all over the world and got people all over the world to begin chanting Hare Krishna, and they became happy. Right? So yeah, we were really pretty fired up. They were telling me, like, my book distribution scores are really low, and I was trying to bring them up. It kind of seemed like some of these areas were kind of burnt out, so it's kind of like trying to pick it up. So they're saying, well, pray to Prabhupada that you can distribute his books, that you engage in his devotional service, that he would be pleased with your service, or your service attitude at least. Because at first they're saying, okay, well, the results of activities, not to be attached to the results of your activities, but engaging in devotional service is a matter of duty, right? But you got to bring in the results, though. There's got to be some sort of results, right? Right. So you got to be unattached. But so we meditate on super soul within the heart. The super soul directs the wanderings of all living entities, and that this person's a living entity. They're not the material body. What I'm actually seeing moving around is like the three modes of material nature, the living entity in the body. Otherwise, it's just a dead, useless body, which is just limp and, just becomes useless, a useless dead body. In fact, they're saying that someone who is not engaged in devotional service is basically a decorated dead body. His breathing is just like the bellows in the fires, right? That fan thing, right? And his crown is just a burden, right? His crown, his turban is just simply a burden. See, his eyes are like the plumes of the peacocks, who never see the form of the deity of the Lord in the temple, right? Everything is all completely condemned and useless, right? Right. The ears are like the snake holes where the snakes live, who never hear the holy name enter into the ears of the holes of the ears, right? So everything's just so much useless endeavor or useless labor. And the end result is there's a chapter called where Lord Piladev will be explaining adverse reactions to fruitive activities. I mentioned this lots of times. It's a sad story. For all your hard work and useless endeavor, one simply again goes to hell as before. It remains within the cycle of birth and death. So does that answer the question? So yeah, we get pretty fired up. Yeah, these people are going to hell, but if they can just read one word and just touch the book, But yeah, this is a pretty serious thing. I mean, going to the hellish planets, the Yamadutas, they're waiting. They're there. They're watching and waiting. So that was our plight. So we can appreciate that because that was the full 180-degree circle that we were involved in too. And we've been saved from that by the mercy of our spiritual master. So that we can appreciate that, so we can try to help others also have that type of happiness and knowledge or understanding that we have, rather than that. And it's actually in one's best interest, because someone is just simply foolish or kind of suicidal, or they want pain or something. The hellish planets are they, if you read the fifth canto, what they actually really do, toss you up in trees with big giant razor blade hooks and pull you down, and these birds come and pluck out your eyes. But it's real. Oh yeah, they put you on a furnace, and the vultures and the snakes, and they're tearing out your entrails, and they're chopping off your limbs and putting you in a cave, and you try to run and from the Yamadutas and try to run from it, right, and you just get caught in these razor blade sharp foliage that just tears you up asunder, so there's no escape. But it's real pain. It's so if we can, who would want to be engaged, in involved in like that type of massacre, self massacre, that puts you back together again. And you're basically being punished for your sinful activities and your specific desires. And because of the specific desires that you have, you developed a specific mentality of a specific form within 8,400,000 species of life. So then you get trained up to take these lower forms, and they're in abominable conditions, although the living entity under illusion thinks that he's happy. So yeah, you can turn them around 180 degrees to give them something that we have that we can appreciate, that we do appreciate, that we give them something that they can appreciate. You see the guys that you're cultivating, the guys, they come to the temple and make friends with us, and yeah, so continue that. So does that answer the question and stuff? Yeah, okay, Jai. Anything else? Any other questions or comments? Okay, Jai, Gora Nitai, Kijai.